I agree with you listening to the debate that ironies seem to abound here. I do believe that the gentlelady from California's second-degree amendment should be defeated. I tried to listen carefully to what she said, and I believe she said that as a resident of public housing, you're granted a privilege, that you receive a subsidy. I acknowledge that. I agree with that. And so I do find it somewhat ironic, having previously, in a different markup, offered an amendment that would say those who are under the age of 65, over the age of 18, able-bodied, not mothers with young children at home, at least after 7 years had to start the process of attempting to find a job. And yet I remember the vehemence with which that amendment was greeted. And so now, all of a sudden, we have the rhetoric that you got a privilege, you got a subsidy, you got to give something back for that. What I'm concerned about, frankly, is the taxpayer who has to pay for all of this. And so I do believe reasonable restrictions, reasonable programs, reasonable regulations that try, where possible, to get people on the road to self-sufficiency are important. The taxpayer's given up something here. I don't see the relationship, as listening to the debate, on trying to have firearm registration and ultimately how that's going to help the poor, beleaguered taxpayer. And I do believe, not unlike the Fourth Amendment, not unlike the First Amendment, that a right enshrined in our Bill of Rights ought to have a particularly high hurdle rate on any type of compelling, a very compelling reason has to be shown why those rights are to be eroded. I'm trying to listen to the debate with an open mind. In my own subjective opinion, I haven't heard that hurdle rate. I don't think we've achieved that here. And I would point out that, again, for many families, I mean, the firearm is the last line of defense. I know, unfortunately, it's on both sides of a very violent equation, but let's not forget the defensive side as well. So a lot of what we've heard in the debate maybe is a more compelling reason why people ought to be able to have these firearms. And again, I don't know what the housing authority, I don't know what the government is going to do with this information. It's not a particular road I care to travel down. And with respect to other ironies, I think what I heard from the gentlelady from New York is that some deference ought to be paid to the Supreme Court in the Heller case before legislation is offered that somehow may erode that. I think that's what I heard, but I do find it somewhat ironic that later on in this markup, we will have legislation intended to erode and undercut the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling. Now, people have the right to do that. They can agree and disagree with the Supreme Court, just like we agree and disagree with the Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Secretary of Treasury. But again, I find this particular debate to be full of ironies and certainly should be noted for future debate. But again, I don't think the threshold has been met for a very fundamental right enshrined within the Bill of Rights to force these people to register these firearms. I would urge a no vote on the second-degree amendment. I yield back.